Good morning or good evening, wherever you are. Welcome to the show. My name is Jerome, and this channel is called Psycho Silver. I do hope that today you're counting your wealth in ounces and also that you're holding your word to yourself, especially those two things. I got a whole bunch of news for us that we're going to go through. I got a bunch of slides and all this news that I spent hours tonight aggregating this news into a presentation for you so you know what's going on out there. What we pay attention to on this channel is we're keeping a very close eye on the draining of all the physical silver in the world disappearing out of vaults and going into the hands of people that understand sound money. We're keeping a close eye on the death of the dollar, which is happening before your eyes. If you know what you're looking for, it's very easy to see, but many people do not recognize the signs. They do not recognize every piece of news information that comes out. You're watching the dollar die. And so in 10 years, okay, there may be something that's still called the dollar, but the dollar that you know it as the reserve currency of the world is going away. And I have a lot of information on that to show you in this presentation. So let's jump in and, let me say one last thing. We're also today, we're going to have a really good look at how, of course, we've spoken about the price of physical silver being suppressed with fake fiat money printed in unlimited supplies and used to bet against the actual physical silver in the vaults to push the price down. We've covered that quite a bit, and I hope you are aware of that. And what we're also going to do on this show is we're going to have a look back at the original silver squeeze that occurred last year in February. And I want to remind you that it's not only the physical metal that has massive paper shorts stacked against it to keep the price down, because it is the only real threat to the dollar. It is the only real threat to fake currency that's printed by all governments around the world. Have a really strong reason for wanting to push the price of gold and silver down, at least for now. Because when gold and silver rise to their true value, it's going to devalue these currencies. So it depends upon when people wake up. When people do wake up, and they will eventually, they're going to have to, because this money printing is an out of control train barreling down the tracks. And we might not see a financial crash. We might not see like one day the entire stock market's wiped out 90%. We might not see that, but that doesn't mean that 90% of your paper assets or your, I say paper assets like your 401k, or 90% of your purchasing power in your savings account can't disappear in a short amount of time. So we can have a crash of the value of these paper assets without an actual crash in the stock market. Does that make sense? In a very short amount of time, you will find that your currency does not buy the amount of eggs it used to, does not buy the amount of gold and silver that it used to, does not buy the amount of energy to heat your home as it used to. And this is the death of the dollar. This is what the death of the dollar is all about. And because these paper assets, the assets in your 401k and your mutual funds, the stock market, are all tied into this derivative debt bubble, those can also be devalued greatly, 90% and more in a short period of time. But you'll never hear about a crash in the market. They'll just lose their value without a crash, because the amount of money being printed around the world is on an exponential upward curve. I hope that all makes sense, and we're going to reiterate that over and over on this channel. That's what this channel's about. And we're also keeping a very close eye on the psychological manipulation that you can expect anytime you do go and try and educate yourself on economics and finance. They do not want you to understand what's actually happening. And what's actually happening is the death of the dollar. And not just the dollar, but many fake currencies, because it's a Ponzi scheme, and every Ponzi scheme eventually fails in one way or another. So let's jump into the news. I got a lot of good stuff for us tonight. Let's start at the beginning. Let's start over here. Change of plans. Check this out. So here is an article from Sprott Money. Sprott Money explained really quickly, and why their opinion holds weight to me is Sprott is it's a pillar. Sprott is a pillar. It's a company. It's a pillar in the natural resources sector of the economy. They are all about things you can dig out of the ground. Uranium, gold, silver, platinum, palladium, your rare earth metals. They are an investment firm that invests heavily in all things that are real hard assets, okay? And they are one of the ones, Sprott is one of the biggest reasons that we will eventually see silver reach its appropriate price. Sprott owns the ETF PSLV, which is 100% backed by silver. When you buy a share of this ETF, there's silver in the vault for every share that they sell, and you can't say the same for SLV. Okay, SLV sells you shares and they don't have silver in the vault, and then they take the money that you do put into the ETF and they use it to short the silver price and lend that silver out to banks. They're all working together to suppress the price. So that is why we care about Sprott. Let's check this out. Sprott writes, "We remain on crash warning. We began September on crash watch, but ended the month on crash warning. Though much has changed since October began, the warning remains until further notice. If you missed last week's episode," okay, let's come down here. Again, to be clear, this warning applies to the US and global equity markets. The move to a warning last week was related to the worsening condition of the UK bond market, as well as several TBTF banks. These concerns began to be recognized last week when the Bank of England appeared to pivot with the announcement of a renewed but limited quantitative easing program designed to stabilize their gilt markets. So that almost happened, and this is not over by a long shot. The situation with England and the Bank of England is not in the news right now, but it's far from over. We are not in the clear. And at one point, do they stop when they say quantitative easing? That just means printing more money, and that is the reason that we are in the situation that our economy is unstable from the printing of money, and gold and silver will be revalued because of that in a big, big way. And as they write here, here's the thing: nothing has changed, at least not yet. The reprieve for the UK gilt market is temporary, and the situation at Credit Suisse and Deutsche Bank remains tenuous. Most importantly, the Fed is continuing their attempt to manage aggregate demand by forcing US equity prices lower. Let's read this tweet real quick, and then we'll move on to the next slide. I wanted to set this up. Today I'm setting this show up. There's a lot more to go by just reminding you we're not in the clear. The Credit Suisse situation and the Bank of England situation has cooled off. It's not in the headlines today because there's other big frightening news happening. But we are still in the midst of the crisis that these things are creating. And the reason that it's a crisis is the derivatives are all tied to one another. Everything's interconnected. Nothing is separate. So if these big institutions fail, that failure is going to cascade throughout the global economy. Someone suggested as much as a quadrillion in derivatives in the global markets around the world. We saw JP Morgan, just one bank, $57 trillion in derivatives. Unreal. Let's read this last tweet. Let's read this tweet and we'll move on. Alex Merck says, so signs of financing stability deteriorating, increasing. Market rallies because there's a Fed. The market rallies because there's a feeling that the Fed will pivot. But key Fed speakers continue to talk higher for longer, notably also core markets working. New York Fed Williams, who is closer to the markets than most. Lisa Abramovich, excuse me. Lisa puts here, New York Fed's Williams said rates have yet to rise to restrictive levels and tightening still has a significant way to go. He added that core markets are still continue to function reasonably well despite financial stability concerns. So they're letting you know that they're not ready to pivot. When they do pivot, you will see the prices of the stock market rise. And I wouldn't be surprised, truthfully, to see cryptocurrency take off with the stock market when the Fed does pivot, because that means easy money for everybody. But now is the time. Even if you want to go back into crypto, well, they haven't pivoted yet, so let's get that clear. So that's still in danger. We don't know, nobody knows if they actually do break something and that does cascade through the world. But when they do pivot, it could be a good idea to get back into stocks. It could be a good idea to get back into cryptocurrency, but this whole thing is very unstable. Don't wait to build your position in real assets. And to me, the epitome of real assets is physical silver. Next slide. And here we have a confirmation. Here's a tweet from FX Hedge. Credit Suisse plans to sell Savoy Hotel. Liquidating. They're telling you right there that there's still trouble at Credit Suisse. All right, I added this to the show just because it was really interesting to me. Somewhat unrelated. We're going to talk about these things a little bit, but this was damn interesting. Neon Revolt on Gab writes, did you guys see pics of the dazzlers they used in Russia the other night? These are optical weapons used to blind spy satellites, supposedly. Here we have one user that writes, bros, this is not funny anymore. This is some shit from the Bible. And here you have these crazy looking lights in the sky over Russia. And I will be looking into this a little bit more. This is interesting. We do know with a great deal of certainty that the new frontier of warfare is, in fact, in space. Satellite technology. Pretty interesting, eh? I had to put that in the show. Okay, next up. Here we have the tweet. A lot of people already know the news. And if you didn't know the news, this is the biggest thing that happened today. There's so many crazy things that are happening all at the same time that nobody even knows what to pay attention to. But to me, this is extremely significant. Wall Street Journal writes OPEC and its allies agreed to slash oil production by 2 million barrels a day, the delegate said, the biggest cut since the start of the pandemic. Well, that's going to result in higher prices. They know what they have. They have the energy for the world, and they know that Russia is cutting its supplies. And so I'm sure, as you may know, that Biden and the others at the EU and all that clan were hoping to get their cheap energy from the Saudis. And at times it's appeared as though that the Saudis were really strong allies of ours. But you see that they're breaking ranks here, and something's changed. It appeared we had a very good relationship, but something's changed there. As we saw with India, another very important ally that we've basically lost recently. Next up, here I have a short article that goes into this in a little more detail. This is from the Daily Mail. The Daily Mail writes, U.S. oil industry mocks Biden after OPEC announced production cuts. Energy groups say the administration now has no choice but to come crawling back to domestic users. U.S. oil industry trade group slashed out at the White House after OPEC cutbacks. With gas already painfully high, OPEC is slashing output by 2 million barrels a day. Life comes at you pretty fast, tweeted the U.S. oil and gas situation. U.S. producers say Biden administration has smothered domestic production, and now they say the White House has no choice but to boost output in the U.S. Walter Bloomberg on Twitter writes, White House, it's clear that OPEC Plus is aligning with Russia. Well, that can't be good. I do also believe that Saudi Arabia and OPEC has begun to arrange for the trade of oil in non-dollar denomination. And if you know anything about that, this is a sure sign of the death of the dollar. It's a certainty. We will not be in the same world when these kind of agreements are broken. Is that stuff well underway? I don't know. But the average American's life is going to change because of these things, and we lost these important allies. Maybe we never had them, hard to say, but the terrain is completely different now. And if the White House is issuing statements like that, well, that's also very concerning. Because it's one thing to lose an ally, but to turn an ally into an enemy, that wouldn't be good, especially not the Saudis. And I did want to go and check out and follow this Oil and Gas Association, the ones that were teasing Biden here. And here's a really interesting tweet they made. If I'm not mistaken, the 76 Chevy Corvette has a 327 cubic inch L79 V8 engine at 350 horsepower with the 4-speed manual transmission. It's capable of going 0 to 60 in 5.8. It runs on gasoline. To build a better America, you will need it. And here's Joe Biden. Isn't this meme material? This is meme material, ain't it? Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh. And the tweet. Guys, this is cringe. I mean, it just especially because of what's happening right now. I gotta save this because this is meme material right here, guys. Oh man, give me 1 second while I save this slide. I don't want to lose it. This is too good. Let's clip this. This belongs in a forum with a funny joke on it. I bet if I look underneath this, there's probably a lot of stuff there already. Let's have a peek real quick. Oh my God. Is that real? The big guy. Oh my gosh. I thought he wasn't called the big guy. On blocks. Get in, loser. We're going to, you know, the thing. The Hodge twins, right? I no more think of myself as being as old as I am than fly. Joe Biden. I'm sure that's real. Do we want to watch? Okay, let's watch this video real quick. Then we'll get back to the slides.
I mean, it's just not, I haven't observed anything in terms of, there's not things I don't do now that I did before.
Let me restart it.
You say your mental focus is?
Oh, it's focused. I haven't, look, I have trouble even mentioning, even saying to myself, my own head, the number of years. I no more think of myself as being as old as I am than fly. I mean, it's just not, I haven't observed anything in terms of, there's not things I don't do now that I did before, whether it's physical or mental or anything else.
You say your mental.
Yikes, guys. Big yikes. Here we have a tweet. The oil piggy bank. By October, the U.S. Strategic Petroleum Reserve will shrink to a 40-year low as the White House taps it to put a lid on the global oil prices. Quite terrifying, with more bad news. More bad news queued up, of which we just saw. The Great Marty writes, war drums. Well, that's terrifying. We definitely don't want OPEC siding with Russia in any form. You would hope that they would just stay neutral. And if you didn't know, the Saudis are very formidable. We've sold them a lot of really excellent weaponry now that I think about it, and pledged to defend them. And now we see the landscape is changing. I do believe that there's a force in the Middle East called the, what's it called? The Gulf Coast Council. And from what I understand, they are very equipped militarily and very capable. That is, so you have nations that people think of in terms of war capabilities, but the Gulf Coast Council is kind of like it's kind of like the UN, except it's more for those oil producing nations in the Middle East, with Saudi Arabia being the main one. But the Gulf Coast Council is well funded and highly capable of war. But I can't imagine that this would be against us. But who knows? Things are changing quick, and we're turning our backs on our own allies. Here's an article from RT. Putin transfers Europe's largest nuclear plant to Russian control. And so this is territory, and this is they captured this territory, and they captured this nuclear plant, and now it belongs to Russia rather than Ukraine. And I think one misconception people usually have about war, if you're not educated, many do not understand that war is to capture assets such as this. It's not about destruction. It's about retaking of assets like this here. And this very nuclear plant, I know, was the object of a lot of speculation. I did hear people more than once say that there was some concern over this thing being bombed, that there was plans for this thing to be attacked and to have this area a nuclear meltdown and to blame Russia for it, or that Russia wanted to do that to hurt the Ukrainians. So this same large nuclear plant has been the object of so much speculation already. I don't think I want to dig into this so much, but it's good to know that this is officially under Russian control and is currently being integrated into Russia. Here we have a short clip of our former president here. Let's have a listen to this.
For the world, nuclear powers must avert those confrontations which bring an adversary to a choice of either a humiliating retreat or a nuclear war. To adopt that kind of course in the nuclear age would be evidence only of the bankruptcy of our policy or of a collective death wish for the world. Nuclear powers
And that speaks for itself, I would say. Here we have an article from The Hill. The Hill writes, Ukraine capital preparing evacuation centers for possible nuclear strike. Ukraine is readying evacuation centers in its capital of Kiev in preparation for a potential nuclear attack, following warnings from Russian President Vladimir Putin that his country would take every necessary action to claim victory. Putin recently threatened that Russia would not hesitate to deploy nuclear weapons against what he called a threat to the territorial integrity of our country. The preparations come following Russia's escalatory move in the war to annex part of occupied Ukraine following a referenda in each of the areas. The votes were viewed as by a large swath of the international community as illegitimate, and Ukraine's allies, including the US, condemned the Russian annexation. Next up. Okay, while we wait for this to load here, as I already stated, we're also going to keep an eye on this energy situation and the Ukraine-Russia situation because it has everything to do with sound money. It has everything to do with silver. We are seeing nations scramble for resources that they need to secure before this debt derivative bubble is compromised. When we see significant damage to the global economy, all nations will be switching to a more realistic and responsible way of controlling their economies, and it's going to be based around natural resources. It always was based around natural resources, but we use these derivatives to make the economies about other things. And while we enjoyed easy money because it's very easy to create money and buy real things with it. But we're going back to a place where it's going to be about trading real things with other real things, or having real money backed by real assets that you trade for things. Make sense? Okay, let's get on to some silver news. The rest of this show is going to be silver. Here we have a post from Ditch the Deep State on Wall Street Silver. And we're just checking in with our daily COMEX vault status. Another keg party coming soon as the silver vaults approach the 4-0. Registered is down 960,000 ounces to 40.2 million ounces. JP Morgan's vault is down 1.6, plus PSLV buys 300,000 ounces at $21 per ounce. Okay, so I did mention I want to make sure that you know I'm connecting PSLV. Remember that first article from Sprott. Sprott is PSLV, okay? And it's one way I wouldn't really, it's tough for me to recommend it, but if you absolutely positively want to get some silver in your portfolio and you don't want to have it in your house, which I think is pretty insane if you don't, but maybe you live in a bad neighborhood, or maybe you need an amount that does not really make sense to keep it at home, you can buy the PSLV and it's backed by real silver. And that's what a lot of people's doing, because every time we're keeping an eye on these vaults, you see PSLV is taking 300,000 ounces, 1 million ounces. They have a massive stockpile. In fact, we might need to have a look at where their stockpile stands versus the LBMA, versus the COMEX, versus the vaults in Shanghai and other areas. We got to be getting close to a place where PSLV is actually the largest hoard of silver in the world. Interesting. COMEX October silver contracts finally see some folks issue delivery notices. 140 contracts, none of which were issued or stopped by a bullion bank, which may explain the dilly-dallying. Those delivery notices pushes the cumulative to 70%, still well below the typical after 4 days. Sprott's 300,000 ounce purchase on Tuesday was bought between 1.5 discount to 1.5 premium to COMEX prices, depending on the time of the deal. Gold sees 1 ton out of the vault and no changes in registered. I'm really curious to see what gold does through all this. It's going to go up, like that's not in question, but how much? It's a good question. And at what rate does it run out versus the platinum? Platinum looks like it might run out first. I believe it's between silver and platinum. We'll see which of those metals will be the first one that'll just be unavailable. It'll be one of the two. Math says probably platinum, but we don't know if the silver data that we're getting is truthful. So it could be silver, or if someone wealthy and has the influence decides to just go and buy all the silver from themselves, they could do it in one swoop. And it could make sense for a big business like Tesla, like Ford, like Sony, to go and scoop all the physical silver up for themselves. And then you have a huge, if they're willing to sell is another thing, but then you have a huge hoard of silver that these businesses won't have to be worrying about digging out of the ground in 5-10 years, right? And it is predicted by many that these big corporations will begin to buy the mines because the physical supply of silver that's just out in open markets is not going to be the same. And you ought to do it now while the prices are good, because they're not going to be very good later. Next up. This was an excellent piece of technical analysis from the Happy Hawaiian on Twitter. The Happy Hawaiian writes, silver miners versus base metals miners have threatened to break down all year in 2022, but just refuse to do so. There's a limit to how undervalued they can get compared to their commodity peers, and it seems like we've reached our peak. So we have a comparison here of the base metal miners to the silver, and we just see once again more proof that silver is completely undervalued in any way you can imagine. Any way you can imagine is completely undervalued, and it doesn't look like it can possibly be more undervalued. That's very strong support here on this chart. So it will be going up one way or another. Next up. Like I mentioned earlier, I want to remind everyone, when we did get the silver squeeze underway a year and a half ago, there was a lot of concentration on the physical silver, and people went off and did some of the wrong moves, like buying SLV, for example. But it's very important. We're going to read this whole article. It's very important to remember that the banks were massively shorting First Majestic Silver, because it sends the wrong signal to people that want to jump in on the momentum trade. They need to maintain the illusion. It's an illusion, right? They need to maintain the illusion that this fiat currency is real, that the dollar is strong. And they can do that by controlling the price of the physical silver, which they've done. They've done it so far, but also it does you no good to control that price if you allow the mining companies to run rampant and achieve a fair market price. So those must also be stopped. And they did stop it. They stopped it, and they stopped it in the same way. Massive short positions. Let's read this a little bit. This is from January 28th, 2021. First Majestic shares are the most heavily shorted among the mining sector. The stock is undergoing a short squeeze as we speak due to higher silver prices, and the Reddit crowd is targeting the stock, forcing shorts to cover. The First Majestic shares were up 30 and 40% pre-market Friday, but could be headed much higher if shorts cover positions. And we have a chart of the crazy run. First Majestic is the most heavily shorted stock in the precious metal sector, with short interest comprising 22.26% of the float, and 549 million of the total volume is sold short, according to MarketBeat. The stock was up 20% on Friday due to a combination of factors: higher silver prices, positive news, and presumably the new buying from the Reddit crowd and short covering. The shorts are only just beginning to cover positions, and the stock should be on the verge of a massive run. Maybe not as spectacular as what we've seen with GameStop, which was shorted more than 100% of its float, but remarkably in its own right. The stock price rose. The stock price of 50 or higher cannot be ruled out, especially if silver makes a run past 30. And we do know that silver was stopped in its tracks right around 30. On the highest volume day in history in silver, and it's all shorts. They saw how hard the buying was coming in, and they just ran more shorts than that because they have unlimited resources to create fake digital money to suppress the price. Reddit forum from Wall Street Bets, which is responsible for the massive short squeeze and 1,000% returns of GameStop, is now targeting SLV. That was the mistake. And Silver Miners, SIL. A note on First Majestic was added to this post below after it was published. The world's biggest short squeeze in the world, SLV to 25 to 1,000. This is where we went wrong. And I do believe that this was a manipulation. This was a psyop right in front of our eyes. This post got pumped up, and it should have never been SLV. It should have always been PSLV. Should have been physical silver. Should have been the miners. Silver bullion market is one of the most manipulated on earth. Any short squeeze in silver paper shorts would be epic. We know billion banks are manipulating gold and silver to cover real inflation. Oh, yeah, well, at least they said the truth. Inflation adjusted silver should be at least 1,000 instead of 25. Why not squeeze SLV to a real physical price? think about the gains. And if you don't care about the gains, think about banks like JP Morgan you'd be destroying along the way. Disclaimer, this is not financial advice. Okay. The difference between First Majestic and GameStop, AMC, Dillard's, Bed Bath & Beyond, and other heavily shorted stocks is that First Majestic is actually a very profitable company with solid fundamentals. The company pays a dividend, is buying back its shares, and is highly profitable, as silver is produced at 15 and 16 all-in sustaining costs. And there we have a chart of the physical silver being squeezed. Once this metal starts to move, it can be hard to stop, since silver is a much smaller market compared to gold. In 2019, the gold market was valued at 24.5 trillion, more than 5 times the 4.4 trillion value of the silver market. I just wanted to, if maybe you've never seen that, maybe you're just getting into precious metals now, you need to be reminded of this. And the truth is that the silver is supposed to divide up the gold. So we live in a situation where gold is 5 times the size of silver in terms of its dollar perceived value. But really, it should be the other way around, and probably a lot more than that. I think the total value of all the silver should probably be more like 20 times the value of the gold market. Easily. Here's a chart. I'm going to keep a very close eye on this. Down here on the bottom, let me get my highlighter on. When silver does begin to run, I'm going to be keeping a very close eye on this. We've seen, so this is representing how the shorts have dwindled since the silver squeeze. And when we do get running in silver, it is inevitable that silver will start running again. And I am coming back to this chart here, especially for First Majestic, and watching to see if the shorts begin to increase to a crazy level again. Next up. Here we have a little bit of this is good TA. It looks a little simplistic, but I tend to agree. So this is for SILJ, and SILJ is an ETF composed of a basket of physical silver mining stocks. And your opportunity to level up with the silver move that is inevitable of silver being repriced to a better price, a much higher price. You do get that leverage. You do get a bigger gain if you're making bets for silver in mining stocks. But mining stocks are very volatile, so you also have to be careful that you don't lose a bunch of money. These mining stocks move a lot more like crypto does. You get really high highs and you get really low lows, and it's basically attached to the price of silver. But you have other X variables. You have variables like, for example, if Mexico raises taxes on the mine, or if there's a worker strike, all those normal risks that are inherent to a business that is outside of the country, especially, are there for the mining stocks. And one thing you can do to manage your risk a little bit is to own an ETF such as this one here. This is SILJ, that gives you a bunch of mining stocks in one share, and you take the aggregate of those. And so many people are going to tell you SILJ is not the best basket of mining stocks you could possibly have. But if you have to choose between only having 1 or 2 stocks, or even 3 or 4, and versus having SILJ is the way to go, okay? But here we do have a potential trend line, and I expect when we do, I think this is going to happen either way. I would love to see us sort of shoot straight up from there, but we might get one or two back tests. It's totally possible. I don't think we're going to be bouncing. The thing about this chart is this is super long term. And Happy Hawaiian has us bouncing off the support all the way in 2026, which I just don't see happening at all. Why? Because the situation with the money printing and the tension around the world, the geopolitical tension and the stress on the economic systems of other nations and ours is going to become unbearable. And we will begin to see the flight of capital to precious metals and all other hard assets. So no, I would not expect it to take this long. But this is an important trend line right here. Next up, here I just simply have a chart, and I actually made a mistake of clipping out the information on it, but I can explain it still. Here we have a chart of, this is SIL-J to the price of silver, and I just wanted to show you the leverage a little bit. The orange line is the price of silver, and your green and red bars is SIL-J. And so you saw right here with the big run, this was a big run up in silver, this orange line here, that SIL-J took off in multiples. So it's leveraged move. You go up faster, you go down faster. And I did do a time frame on this chart to show you that this all occurred in only 224 days. That's how fast silver can move, and the miners. Crypto style moves. And I do expect, we did see this last chart by the Happy Hawaiian where he has all these back tests going out into the future for quite a long time. No, I believe we'll see a huge move either starting now or I would say at the very latest, the middle of next year. And it's just going to take off and it's going to run for hundreds of days. And it's going to look like that, but on steroids. So this was only 224 days, and that was a 350% move. And I wanted to point out this other move right here, which is also very significant. And to me, this was more proof. To me, I said this is proof of the manipulation and the shorts, because the CTF should have run much, much higher than it did like the previous time. You saw what it did over here on the last slide. Well, here it should have done something similar. It should have gone all the way up. But I do believe there were, again, massive shorts against the price. But still, in only 161 days, you had a massive run, 250% in the price of SIL-J. Here's the same chart, but this time is First Majestic, which is the blue chip of silver stock. We had a look at the shorts that they placed against First Majestic earlier in the show. And here we see it again with the vertical move in silver in orange. We had First Majestic rise and multiples of that. This was a 530% move, and it occurred in 231 days. Massive, massive. This was a 545% run, and that occurred in 153 days. Lastly, we did have a 373% run that occurred in 357 days. And that one there, we had a huge bottom, but then we got caught. This part right here was the short squeeze right there. But we did put in that big bottom over here. And I do believe that was having to do with the COVID, where all markets bottomed right there. So we saw a really steep bottom in the price of physical silver as well. Everything went down together. And then it was just a monster run up from there. And I thought this was good advice from the Happy Hawaiian. He writes, buy the ugliest, cheapest silver for the ounce that you can. That way, when it comes time to sell, you aren't attached to it. Keep a small amount of cool collectible or sentimental items for sure. But if you're buying it as an investment, you have to think about selling it eventually. I definitely agree with that. Okay. Last up. Well, one more note on that. One more note. I love that tweet because it's what I do. When I first began to stack, I was into getting all the fun coins and I was buying the nice bars. There's premium bars of silver and then there's more run-of-the-mill bars of silver. And you get the same amount of silver. So you can be buying a 10-ounce bar of silver and be paying $15, $20 more for the same 10-ounce bar because the design on it's cool, or it has a different kind of sheen on it, or it's pressed into a shape that's more interesting, or if it's from if it's from a mint that is interesting. Some people prefer certain mints over others because they have a more premium feel or look to them, which is all fine, but I do recommend you buy ugly silver that you're willing to part with, and don't worry about buying tarnished silver because it weighs the same. It's a good strategy. You need to be able to trade it when the time arrives. And I'll tell you, my strategy is when we do see silver start to run, I think $50 is in the bag. $50 silver is for sure. When we do reach the 50, I will be selling at a minimum 1/5 of my silver, and especially in the stocks, 1/5. But I want to see what the geopolitical and the economic conditions are at that point. But the stock for sure. The stock is, I'll probably sell a much higher percentage of the stock when we do reach 50, maybe even half, because that'll be time to cash in. We don't know how high the price of silver eventually goes. And if it does go to the moon, that does not mean that you're going to enjoy the benefits you might expect from the price of the stock. These mines could be nationalized, meaning they're seized. They're seized by the nation in which they exist. We're seeing geopolitical tensions mounting already, and nations we've considered allies up until now might feel differently by the time we get there to higher silver prices 1 year from now. Mexico, Peru, Argentina. It's all very possible. Even Canada, which I assume will always be friendly to the US, but even them could nationalize their mines. And what happens to the price of your stock then? I'm not sure. You probably get paid out at an amount that is not nearly what it should be worth. Lastly, this is my last slide for us. A little bit of comedic relief for you. Joe Burnett writes, in 50 years, 1 Bitcoin will be enough to feed all of humanity for centuries. Everyone is underestimating the absolute scarce money paired with exponential growth technology. He continues, 100 years ago, who would have thought it would be free to have access to endless video content? Every hour, 30,000 hours of video are uploaded to YouTube, all for free. In the future, restaurants will serve free food and monetize you via your attention.
Have you ever wanted to believe in something, even though you knew it couldn't be true? Did you ever want to believe it so bad?
They just want to believe it so bad. Impossible. Oh, I did like this reply. What are you, an idiot sandwich? Let's see this. Okay, it's not going to play. Next man asks, what are you smoking? Can you pass me some of that? This user writes gold, period. Really, 1 Bitcoin? Okay, I'd love to see you eat one. I'm sure you will never go hungry. This man says, you're bang on, mate. 1 Bitcoin can definitely infinitely divided and used by an infinite number of infinity divisible pizza slices, thereby enabling the feeding of all humanity for centuries with just 1 Bitcoin. Oh, I'm glad that was sarcastic. I was a little worried this was going to be another guy that agrees with all that. It's a for sure thing that technology is going to continue to improve, but it won't be Bitcoin. Bitcoin will be improved upon, and it might even still be called Bitcoin, and they kind of swap out the infrastructure. And Bitcoin can remain something big, I'm certain of that. But the most capable people, the most hardworking, intelligent people on the planet, even if they use blockchain, they might use the technology of Bitcoin and blockchain. And I know the hashing is very important too. But they will want to be rewarded for their work. So they will be creating their own technology away from Bitcoin. There's no reason for these people to go and continue to, these talented people that will improve upon the technology, to go into Bitcoin and enrich people that are holding Bitcoin with all their hard work and dedication. It's not going to happen. And that is why you see the market value of Bitcoin plummeting. It simply is getting old, and it will continue to do so. And even if they update the infrastructure, I understand that's entirely possible that they do update the infrastructure. But the bottom line is humans are going to want to get the most money they can for their work, and the most talented people are going to expect the biggest paydays. And they're not going to go and work for Bitcoin to do that. My 2 cents. Blockchain is the future. Crypto is the future. But I'm not sure if that one cryptocurrency that will completely change everything. Well, I guess Bitcoin's already changed everything, but it's not the final. There's more steps after that. That's a certainty. So with that, I do hope you enjoyed this show. I got more shows for you every day. I'm going to continue making a show to serve you. And I want to make these shows better, and I want to have guests. So please, if you enjoyed any part of this or you have any suggestions for me, I would really appreciate if you left me a comment or a like on the video. I want to grow to a point where I do begin to get good guests on this, and I want to improve myself on this channel. So with that, I do hope that you are in good health, and I appreciate you, and I hope that I was able to serve you today. And until the next time, goodbye.